This is the Thermaltake Tower 300, and if it looks different to you, it's because I did a custom paint job on it in an attempt to make a fully custom themed Dragonball Z PC, and I modeled it after Goku's colors of orange and blue, sprinkled in a little bit of yellow on the radiator, and of course, I have a custom loop in here. Now, unfortunately, this video is not going to be what I wanted it to be. I wanted this video to be, hey, look at my dream PC. But unfortunately, my dream PC has kind of sort of turned into a nightmare. Maybe I should have done a little bit more research, but maybe I could have faulty hardware. There is a lot to talk about in this video, but I'm calling the video before you buy the Tower 300 because I think there are some things about this case that most creators, reviewers, etc., they're just not talking about. But I want to tell you about my experience with the case, and I want to tell you about my awful customer service experience with PNY, which is starting to take a turn for the better, but that is still pending. So who knows, maybe this will be a part one of a part two. We'll have to see how things pan out. But ultimately, this was supposed to be my dream PC, and unfortunately, I'm having to ditch it. And here's why. Now, before we go any further, I want to say thank you to all of my Patreon members. Thank you for your continued support. Thank you for all you do. And thank you for working with me in our Discord on this PC project and giving me ideas on this build, how to make it better, how to troubleshoot different things. And I do appreciate all of your continued support. Thank you so much. Okay, so in the Tower 300, I have the Nvidia RTX 4090 and the AMD Ryzen 7800X 3D. And I have the 7800X 3D with a custom liquid cooling loop with a 360 radiator exhausting out the side of the case. And the Nvidia RTX 4090 is basically sort of taking care of itself over there on the left-hand side, which is exactly the way that Thermaltake designed the case. We have two fans up top serving as exhaust. I have a fan in the middle serving as intake, and there's also a fan in the back serving as exhaust as well. Now, in my opinion, that is a fairly straightforward and standard fan configuration for a case like this. However, I tried many other different configurations as well because I was having overheating issues. In fact, my very first configuration was completely broken because I followed Thermaltake's official recommendation for how the fan configuration is supposed to be set up in this case. And if you look at it, it tells you that the three fans on the right hand side where you would have a radiator for an AIO or a custom liquid cooling loop, those fans should be placed as intake and not exhaust. And I thought to myself, you know, that sounds like a terrible idea. You should really exhaust the CPU heat out of the case. But at the same time, I got to thinking about it. Hey, I've never built in a case like this before. Maybe the design allows for the heat to operate a little bit differently. After all, I mean, this is Thermaltake's official case and their official website, and this is what they say to do, so let's do it. I did it and immediately hit 80C while gaming with my RTX 4090, and it was immediate. I mean, I fired up XDefiant Native 4K max settings, immediately went to 80C. I knew there was something wrong. So naturally from there, I started doing a bunch of research, trying to figure out, did I do something wrong? Because again, the Thermaltake documentation says to do it this way. And ultimately, I started talking to another tech YouTuber, CPPC TEK. He also has an RTX 4090. He also has a Tower 300, and we just started comparing and contrasting fan configurations and our thermals and all of that different stuff. And ultimately, he did tell me, hey, yeah, you should definitely flip those fans around and make them exhaust on that side of the case. And that made complete sense. And so I went ahead and switched them around. And immediately I went from 80C down to about 75C. But even at 75C, I was thinking there's still a problem here because the RTX 4090 should not be running at 75C. I don't care if it's native 4K. I don't care if it's max settings. I know what this card can do. I have tested my 4090 extensively here on the channel. There are multiple videos around it. I know what this card is capable of doing. I know that in a game like XDefiant at native 4K with max settings, at the worst, I should be between 63 to 65C. And 65C is really pushing it. And that is just stock out of the box settings. And of course, if you tinker with the card, if you tweak it just a little bit, maybe you do a slight undervolt, maybe you do a slight power limit, maybe you do a more aggressive fan profile, something of that nature, then I know that the temperatures will be even lower than the stock temperatures, obviously. But I say all that to say this right here. Basically, in the Tower 300 with my Nvidia RTX 4090 from PNY, the PNY XLR8 model specifically, I basically always stay somewhere in the 70s. It does not matter if I undervolt it, if I power limit it, if I add extra fans, if I take away fans, if I change the fan orientation, it does not matter. Now, I basically spent the better part of 2.5 days going back and forth with CPPC TEK in private DMs and Discord, sharing different ideas, talking about different settings, and trying different fan configurations in order to find the best optimal performance for the Tower 300 with an RTX 4090. Massive shout out to CPPC TEK. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your help. And I really appreciate all the testing you helped me with during this time. Now, unfortunately, even after talking with him and trying a bunch of different profiles, I really did not see much success. I even took 2 extra fans and shoved them against the 4090 on the left-hand side, which, by the way, the Tower 300 does not officially support that configuration. And so you have to get extra creative whenever you're putting fans over there. But even after doing that and brute forcing air into that side of the case, I could not get below 70C in XDefiant. In fact, the only time I was able to get below 70C in the Tower 300 with my 4090 was by using a combination of a custom frame rate limiter to no more than 120 FPS and by undervolting the card. And by using that combination of settings, I was able to get the card down to about 68C while gaming in XDefiant. Now, it is important to understand, number one, while running idle and not gaming, the GPU is totally fine. You're talking about 32C, give or take. I mean, outside of gaming, the Tower 300, my 4090, totally fine, 0 issues. But the moment you put the card under load, we have a pretty big issue here. Secondly, I keep talking about XDefiant because that is where I first noticed the issue. That was the first game I fired up and I saw 80C and I said, okay, I'm now going to focus on getting the temperatures down using XDefiant as a baseline. I understand there's more games out there outside of XDefiant. And yes, I play other games outside of XDefiant. The problem is when you're building your supposed dream PC and you're trying to get a video out for your channel, you're not thinking about, hey, let me go benchmark 10 or 12 different games, look at all the different thermals. The fact is my 4090 in the Tower 300 is going to be over 70C, no matter if I'm playing XDefiant or Call of Duty or something else. It doesn't matter because there is a problem here. Let's talk about the problem. The problem is not an airflow issue. Trust me, it's not. Adding the extra fans and trying all the different fan configurations you could possibly think of, nothing really alleviated the problem. What is the problem? It's an orientation issue. And when you scour the internet and you find some older, different Reddit posts, you can see people talking about issues with GPUs that have vapor chambers in a vertical mounted fashion. Basically, the general consensus that I could gather is that if your GPU has a vapor chamber, you should not vertically mount it or invert it or put it in any type of weird configuration. It is meant to be in a standard horizontal mount. Now, there are exceptions to that because CPPC TEK has an RTX 4090, the Asus ROG Strix, which clearly has a vapor chamber, and his temperatures were a lot better than mine. He was able to play games like Forza Horizon in 4K, Call of Duty in 4K, and be around 63 to 64C, which is exactly the type of temperatures I would expect. So clearly his vapor chamber or whatever he has going on over there is a lot better than what I have on my PNY. Now, I would also expect that because his card is about a $2,000 4090, whereas mine is a standard MSRP $1,599 4090. And so maybe there's something there. Now, you could also make the argument, no, PNY's vapor chamber is totally fine, but yours is faulty for some reason. And so I needed to confirm that my theory was right. It is an orientation issue. It's not an airflow issue. And so that's where I decided to get really crazy. As you can see, I have a custom liquid cooling loop in my case, and I flipped the case over to basically makeshift a horizontal standard configuration, if you will, using motherboard boxes. And I filmed myself playing XDefiant. You can see clear as day, it says 59C on the screen. And then you see me go over there and just flip the case over. I do not recommend doing this. This is incredibly dangerous for your components. My 4090 PCB could have broke. The pump could have malfunctioned. My loop could have came apart. So many things could have gone wrong in this situation. But I say, thank God that nothing bad happened. But after I got the case flipped over, you can see that over time, the GPU temperature slowly but surely started to increase and increase and increase. And by the end of the video, I was around 73 63C. And so that's when I knew for a fact, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that the orientation is in fact the problem. And now we're back to the original question. Okay, we know for a fact it's an orientation issue here, because when it's horizontally mounted, your temps are fine, but when you invert it like this in the Tower 300, you're not fine. You clearly have a problem. So is my specific 4090 faulty, or is it just P&Y? Maybe their design is terrible with the vapor chamber. I don't know. According to Reddit, if you have a vapor chamber, you're not supposed to do this at all. It's always bad. But that doesn't match up with CPPC TEK's testing and, you know, his experience. So clearly there are variances within vapor chambers. So I decided to contact P&Y directly, and unfortunately that was a terrible experience. But let me share with you what happened and the current status of everything. So I reached out to P&Y and immediately started talking about, hey, I have the Tower 300. My P&Y 4090 is sometimes getting close to about 80C. And of course, the immediate response I got was, well, that's well below the maximum temperature limit. You're fine. It's operating within parameters of the GPU, blah, blah, blah. Let me just say this real fast. While that may technically be true, gamers don't want to hear that. Customers don't want to hear that. If they buy a product that usually is running around 62, 63C, and now magically one day it's all the way up to 80C, even if it's below whatever the maximum threshold is, a customer does not want to hear that, okay? Like that's not what I want to hear. I'm not going to take that as an answer. So I push back. Now, as you can see here, the customer service representative told me that the max operating temperature is 95C. Thermal shutdown occurs at 105C. Now, that is technically not correct. So right off the bat, not only am I being told, hey, it's within the operating temperature, but then I'm also being told this is the operating temperature, which is factually not correct. And later on in the conversation, the customer service representative said, oh, by the way, I double checked it and here's the actual numbers. The customer service rep said, I double checked and found the max operating temperature for the RTX 4090 is 90C, which 80C is still well within the normal operating range. Again, even if that is accurate and true, I don't care. I don't want my card hitting 80C. Now, while talking to this customer service representative, a lot of the conversation was very slow paced. You can see here from this screenshot that at one point I was waiting 32 minutes for a response. 32 minutes. And no, this was not a situation where the customer service rep was like, hey, give me a few minutes. I'll be right back with you. Hey, let me go check on this. They would just send me something and then not respond. And the longest wait was 32 minutes. But there were other times where I waited 11 minutes, 15 minutes. It was a very, very slow process talking with customer service. But okay, let me try to quickly wrap this up and just put a bow on it, because I'm not really here to hammer on P&Y and talk about how terrible they are or something like that. That's not the point. The whole reason why I contacted P&Y was because I was able to confirm in my testing that the orientation is the reason why that I'm having performance issues on my 4090 around the temperature. But what I don't know is the problem because I'm not supposed to mount the 4090 that way, and therefore basically saying that, hey, this card is not supported in that manner officially. Or is the problem that my card specifically has a vapor chamber issue and I need to RMA it? That is the whole reason why I contacted P&Y. And ultimately where we landed was that the customer service representative confirmed that the vapor chamber is not gravity fed. And so therefore, regardless of the orientation, the cooling performance should be the same on the card. But they also went on to re-clarify yet again that I am still well within operating parameters of the card. And then they ended the chat. You heard that right. They ended the chat. They did not go on to say, hey, did we resolve your issue? Did we answer all of your questions? Is there anything else I can do for you today? That didn't happen. They just straight up ended the chat. So I was pretty upset about that. And I was planning on going even harder in this video on P&Y. And I sent out a tweet saying, hey, I'm very upset at P&Y Technologies, and I tagged them. Later that day, right before close of business, I got an email from the supervisor at P&Y Technologies. And he basically said, I got your ticket. I'm so sorry. He expressed his, apologies for my bad customer service experience. And he tried to say how the representative was super busy and all these other things. And ultimately, he wanted to make sure that I was taken care of. And so he asked me for a bunch of information, a bunch of technical information. It took me about 30 minutes to respond to this email because that's how detailed it was. I provided screenshots, I provided videos, I provided the proof of purchase with the date, and I gave him my shipping address because after his engineer confirms, they may or may not RMA the card and send me a new card. And again, I even stressed to the supervisor in this email, I am not here to cause problems and to try to get a free card or whatever. All I'm trying to confirm is that should my card perform well in this position? If the official position is no, it shouldn't, I can accept that. Take the card out, put it back in my NV5, and I'm moving on. I'm a happy camper. But if the official position is no, regardless of how you mount it, you should get the same performance, then okay, I got a problem with my card and I want my card fixed. And that's really where I'm at this point. And from everything that people keep telling me, my card should perform exactly the same in this orientation. But according to Reddit, that's not true. But according to PNY, that is true. But I'm still within operating parameters. Oh my goodness. So again, this was supposed to be my dream PC build video and all of those things. And as you can see, it's basically turned into a nightmare. Here's where I stand on the Tower 300, regardless of what happens with the PNY. I like the idea of the Tower 300. I love the fact that it's non-conventional. I love the fact that it has a small footprint on your desk. You can fit big size components like an RTX 4090 and still a micro ATX motherboard, still have a lot of extra space left over on your desk. I think that is awesome. I love the fact that they have optional accessories. You can buy a stand to put it on the side if you want. You can buy an LCD display for the outside of it. It comes in a wide variety of colors. I love all of these things. And it comes with a couple of fans pre-installed, 2 up top, 1 in the back. And overall, I do think there's a lot of value here. And there's a lot of things about this case that I really, really like. But there are things about this case that I really don't like. And mostly that revolves around the IO and how you access the IO in the back. And other reviewers talked about it, but I really feel like they kind of glossed over it. But I really need to hammer this home. If you are a content creator, you should not use the Tower 300 because all of your IO is on the inside of the case and you have to take the top off to get to it, or you have to take off the front panel to get to it. But see, here's the problem. You're limited on the height of what you install back there. Let's say, for example, you're using an Elgato Cam Link like myself. That will not fit in the back of the case because you're going to have a clearance issue with your HDMI cable whenever it runs into the case in the fan up top. They're going to collide. So you're forced to use the Elgato Cam Link outside of the case like I'm using, and the only other place you have a USB port is in the front of the case. So now in my scenario, as I'm filming, I'm looking at this thing, I have a big cable running around the case itself, and I got this big fat cam link right in front of the case. Anything aesthetically pleasing about the case right now has completely been tarnished because of this. I cannot stand the IO on this case. I can't. And from the GPU perspective, the IO going into the GPU itself has a lot of pressure on it because you're coming in through the top of the case and you're going under and back over again, and your cable's having to do a lot of zigzagging. And overall, I just don't think it's healthy for the display cables in the long run. And so that's something to be mindful of here. And obviously it's a fingerprint magnet. You have 3 different glass panels, 2 small ones and 1 big one, and they're all a massive fingerprint magnet, and you have to touch it in order to take it off. So you're pretty much always going to have to live with looking at fingerprints, or you're going to have to constantly keep a rag nearby to wipe it off. Next up, you can put a 120 millimeter fan in the bottom center of the case, but I have 2 problems with that. The first problem is I don't really see this doing much for intake. I just don't, because right below that fan, you have your power supply shroud with all your power supply cables. And we all know how big power supplies are. We all know how big cables are. We all know how many cables are going to be down there. And then when you start adding in controllers and all of that stuff, how in the world is this fan supposed to help with intake? That makes no sense to me. And then in addition to that, you're going to have a clearance issue with your 24-pin power connector on your motherboard. And so you're really going to have to force it back and then slide in the fan, and the fan and the power cable are going to hit against each other. It's just, there's definitely issues with this case. I like the overall idea of it, like I said a while ago, but there are so many little things like this that just really cause a problem. And overall, you have the orientation of the GPU where you might be somebody like me, you might be somebody like one of those people in the Reddit post where you put your GPU in this position and your temperatures are horrible. And I think that's why almost every review out there was with a 4070, 4070 Super, 4070 Ti, something along those lines, because even if your temperatures are negatively impacted in this orientation, with a card like a 70 series card from Nvidia, you're not really going to overly notice those temperature differences because these cards are 1440p cards. These cards are pulling in less than 300 watts, so they're not going to run that hot to begin with. But with a card like my 4090, for example, if there is a problem with the cooling mechanism, I am pulling in over 400 watts, so I'm going to see that as a problem. I just don't know if it's my card specifically or just in general. GPUs, most GPUs probably shouldn't be mounted this way. I don't know. And so I'm going to keep working with PNY, going back and forth with the customer service rep, see what his engineer says next week, and we'll take it from there. But hey, let me know your experience and your thoughts in the comment section below. Have you built in the Tower 300? Have you built in one of the other Tower cases? Have you ever had issues vertically mounting your GPU? And if so, tell me about it. I want to read your stories. Hey, if you like this video, please do me a favor, hit that like button because it goes a long way in helping me out. If you're new, get subscribed. And by the way, pretty much this entire video was documented over on Discord prior to me ever filming it. And so if you want to be a part of the conversation leading up to videos like this, consider joining the Discord with the Patreon link down below in the pinned comment. All right, until next time, E-Rock out.